Okay, I will say hello and welcome back to another episode of The Balance Breakdown, the second episode of The Balance Breakdown. I am joined today by Poland's native, Mr. Sean McGuinness. Sean, how you doing, sir?
Yeah, very, very good, Harry. Thank you. A little bit rough, but quite good.
And I am joined by the advocate for male balding after childbirth, Mr. Jack's here. How's it going?
Thank you, mate. That was quite the introduction.
Yes. How's it going, boys? How's things? Sean, do you want to tell us a little bit about your jaunt to Poland?
My jaunt, yeah. I wish it had just been a jaunt, to be honest. It was a really good trip. I feel like it was quite different to how I imagined it in my mind. I thought it'd be, a sort of more gentle holiday, maybe see some sights, absorb culture, get some fridge magnets, like that sort of thing. Unfortunately, the people I was going with, especially one person in particular, had a very different idea. Maybe a more high-octane holiday he was looking for, if you like. So I got off the plane, and the next thing you know, I was at a shooting range, firing Kalashnikov assault rifles. Very, very intense. But yeah, it was a very good weekend. And as you can probably tell by my voice, I'm still in recovery. There's a part of me in Poland for sure, I think.
I mean, it sounds like you had a great time, to be honest, mate.
Yeah, it was really, really good. It was.
Good. And how many children are you going to have birthed over there that you're not bringing back?
At least 9, probably.
Fair enough. Good. Well, that's phenomenal. So obviously we're here to talk, we'll move swiftly on. We're here to talk about UFC 253, Adesanya Costa. But before we get into that, there's a couple of bits of news that I'd like to hear your guys' opinions on. The first one is Nick Diaz has again reported that he's supposedly coming back into MMA. This time there is some video evidence of him having done some form of a weight cut and landing in between the 165 and 175 pound range. I put an article out on Attack the Back for my thoughts on this, but I wanted to get your thoughts, Jack. What do you think? Do you think we see Nick Diaz back or not?
I do think we'll see him back because I think it is most likely that he has drunk through all of the millions he made from fighting GSP and Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is Nick's. Everyone knows it's been well documented that Nick doesn't necessarily love fighting or love the culture that surrounds fighting. Yeah. He just does it as a means to an end. And yeah, I think if anyone's followed him on Instagram for the past few years, it's been pretty sad to see someone who was once one of the kind of cleaner and healthier athletes in the sport just become a drunk. Basically, he's become the Paul Gascoigne of mixed martial arts. So yeah, I think he will come back. He looks to be in good nick. I unfortunately think this is a little bit too late. I would have really loved to see Nick come back when Woodley was still champion. I think that Nick would have actually given. I think stylistically he presents a lot of problems for Woodley, whereas someone like Usman, someone like Colby, they've got the cardio to go to push 5 hard rounds with him. They've got the wrestling to fall back on. So yeah, his best years are definitely going to be behind him. I will still tune in, as I've always been a big Nick Diaz fanboy, but I don't necessarily expect great things.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I think he is going to come back, but whether that's a comeback that I'll probably watch it either way. But to be honest, he had that interview, didn't he, with Ariel Helwani?
The longer one, yeah.
Yeah, the longer one. And to be honest, I don't see how anyone could come out of that interview thinking that it was a good idea for him to get back into prize fighting.
I agree.
I think the biggest question is going to be how much of an impact have those years of partying and everything else had on him and his style. Promising things about it. I suppose the video of the weight cut at least shows that there's some sort of motivation there, some sort of discipline. And I do think with certain matchups, the UFC could look after him. And for example, like the Robbie Lawler rematch, I think would be a nice one just because Robbie's also sort of at the tail end of his career and has seen better days. And that would be, I've seen a couple of people suggest that and I like that. But in terms of an idea of him being back in title contention, I agree with Jack. I would not want to see him against the Kamaru Usman or Kobe or, to be honest, like many of those guys in the top 5 at welterweight at the moment, I'd rather they give them legend matchups.
So the matchup that I've heard also reported is Dan Hardy. Dan Hardy
That
wants a
wouldn't be
comeback
too
match.
shabby. That wouldn't be too shabby. I also, I quite like the idea of Nick Diaz, Damian Maia.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the thing that worried me the most is the Ariel Helwani interview, frankly. We've known for a long time that Nick doesn't put sentences together very well, and he has a very, very long stream of consciousness, and in between there's probably some nuggets of information, but it was bad, right? Like, it was bad. It sounded like I was talking to Sean mid-Polish session, and I was trying to ask him what his name was, and what I got was an entire stream of absolute horseshit. And look, I mean, again, we're going to watch this, right? We're going to see him come back. If he does come back, we're going to watch it. We're going to enjoy it, frankly, whatever happens. And, you know, I think the other thing here is Nick has spoken at length about all the work he put in to become this megastar and get paid, but never actually quite did reach the levels that his brother did, right? And again, this is someone, he talks often and frequently about how his brother is someone that he never wanted to bring into fighting, and yet Nate has now reached this unbelievable level of stardom that Nick never really did, right? Financially or commercially. So I wonder whether there's a little bit of, not spite necessarily, but a little bit of Nick wanting what Nate has, or at least believing that he deserves some of what Nate has, and that's one of the reasons why he's coming back. But yeah, I mean, let's see. I think I'm down for the Robbie match. I'm down for the Maia match. I actually think the Dan Hardy match is pretty good, just because, look, I mean, Dan's been training, obviously. He's been training the guys at Warhead, Hardy MMA, and he's obviously been doing rounds and keeping busy and whatever. And Nick, I imagine, has done the same with Nate, you know. So I kind of like that, the veteran thing. I'm down for that. The other bit of news that I wanted to talk about was the Dustin Poirier versus Tony Ferguson matchup that was supposed to go ahead at UFC 254 as the co-main event to Khabib Gaethje. At the moment, it looks like that fight's not going to happen due to Dustin wanting a better compensation package and the UFC saying no. Obviously, Tony has now come out and urged the UFC to make that fight, which is just so Tony Ferguson, right? But Sean, what do you think about that? What's your thoughts on the fighter pay situation?
Yeah. Well, first off, just with the Tony Ferguson thing, I love that he's tried to make himself his opponent's fight manager. Like, that's just the most hilarious Tony Ferguson thing. He's actually gone into negotiations for his opponent. You know, that's just absolutely hilarious. But yeah, I think fighter pay, it's a tricky one. Like, I'm not an expert by any means, but obviously when the sort of Reebok era came in, I think having that single brand running the sport really crippled a lot of fighters financially. I remember Brendan Schaub saying that most of his money came off sponsors, essentially.
Roy Nelson said the same thing.
Yeah, and then there's obviously the other issue of MMA being a sport where if you lose, you also lose half of your purse, you know. So it's massive amounts of money that you're losing, you know, with a loss and everything else. But I think it's a tricky one as well, because obviously the current climate that we're in with COVID and everything else, Dana White's also been pretty open in saying that I can't afford to pay certain people certain amounts of money.
It's bullshit. I really think it's bullshit.
Do you not think so?
I think it's bullshit. Like, okay, the gate thing is obviously real, right? If you're going to a Conor McGregor pay-per-view, the gate is 50 million, 60 million. That's huge amounts of money, right? It's huge amounts of money. I get that. But for an Adesanya Costa, Abu Dhabi, how much gate do you reckon that does? I mean, it's millions, right? They are losing out on millions in these events. That's true. But they just sold the company for 4.2 billion to Endeavor, right? They also just signed the ESPN deal for mega money, and they're getting a guaranteed purse. They're getting a guaranteed purse, essentially, for every card that they put on. Like, they can afford it, right? They can afford it. Like, if you looked at how much Ari Emanuel and Dana White take as a salary every year, like, how much of that, if they took 50% of that, and obviously, you know, that's a lot of money or whatever, but you take 50% of that and you provide it out to the fighters, like that's an insane amount of money. And as you say, the Reebok deal as well, right? Obviously they're signing with Venom now, but the Reebok deal, you know, you're talking guys that are like Anderson Silva, for instance, or probably a better one would be like Donald Cerrone, who's fought forever in the UFC, and they're getting what, 25 grand, 30 grand? Like that's ludicrous.
Yeah. And also the other side as well to the sort of COVID less pay thing is that, you know, I can imagine that with fighters like Conor McGregor, where the money is so big, but Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson, neither of them are asking for that amount of money. You know, they're just asking for, you know, like a kind of above average amount, but it's not like astronomical sums of money that they're asking for.
I agree. I mean, did you see how much Dustin Poirier made against Dan Hooker?
No.
His purse was 250,000.
Jeez.
So you get Conor McGregor that you're going to pay 15 million to, or whatever it is, right? And Dustin Poirier is asking for a little bit more than 250K. Bearing in mind, he's a future Hall of Famer, I imagine. He's a legend of the 155-pound division and 145-pound division in some fashion. He's fought everyone there is to fight, continues to fight, exciting fighter, fan favorite, and you're squabbling over what? Like, come on, son.
Yeah, especially after that Dan Hooker fight as well. You'd hope that they'd start paying him more money. Like, if anyone earns their money in the UFC, it's Dustin Poirier. You know?
The Hooker fight, the Gaethje fight, the Alvarez fights. Like, come on, son. The war with McGregor, like Holloway fights. Oh man, the Holloway fights. Jesus. Like, yeah, unbelievable. Anyway, Jack, what do you think?
So I think context is key here, right? I'm obviously in favour of the fighters getting compensated more, but it would be good to understand how much more specifically Poirier is asking for. I am definitely in favour of him making as much as he physically can. Mm-hmm. If this is like a John Jones versus Ngannou situation, where John's like, they're not paying me enough, and then you find out he's actually asking for 20 million or whatever the sum was, when he actually brings in far less than that, then I think actually a case could be made in the UFC's favour. Most likely, I would imagine. I would imagine Poirier's being reasonable, right? And he definitely he's definitely earned it as well. But yeah, I just don't see this being an issue that's going to get resolved anytime soon, really. Until the UFC gets stronger competition, until other promotions out there are offering the big bucks and from a brand perspective are able to match the UFC, we're going to be finding ourselves having this conversation more and more.
I agree, and I think the unionization thing is obviously, that's the thing that, and I don't want to derail this podcast too much. Like I want to get onto the fights, but the unionization thing is just so mental to me. Like fighters being independent contractors, I get that, but when you've got independent contractors that aren't making substantial amounts of money, like nobody's making substantial amounts of money really. Like if you've got a Dustin Poirier, let's just say Dustin Poirier goes and fights Dan Hooker. This is 2020 pay for Dustin Poirier, right? And he's getting 250 grand. Like, you're not going to, like, of course, 250 grand is a lot of money, but the camp, everything else he has to pay for outside of the camp in order to get him there, the taxes he's paying, like, you're not seeing 250K, right? Like, you're just not. Maybe you're seeing 175K, maybe 150K, but like, even that, like 150K to do what he did, no, like, come on.
For the years off his life.
Yeah, exactly. This risk pay, right? It's like going to work on an oil rig, right? People are like, oh my God, you get paid so much money. Yeah, but I'm going to die tomorrow, right? like, what are you talking about? But yeah. Before we dive into 253, like obviously there's some nice fights this weekend. We're recording this on a Tuesday the 15th. As of right now, we are looking at Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley. I actually think this is a pretty good card, to be honest. There's some real sleeper fights on here. I think the notable fights for me are obviously the main event. Donald Cerrone versus Nico Price. Hamzat Chimaev versus Gerald Meerschaert. I think Johnny Walker, Ryan Spann is a great fight. I'm really interested to see Kevin Holland versus Darren Stewart. Could we just for a little second talk about fucking Darren Stewart's run in the UFC? Mate, talk about murderer's row. Like, this motherfucker has fought Spicely, okay. Spicely's like whatever. He's fought Francimar Barroso twice. He's fought Julian Marquez, who looked really good in the Contender Series. He's fought Charles Byrd. He fought Edmund Shabazian. Darren Wynn was supposed to be the next big thing, and he had to fight him. Maki Bartolo was going to be a good prospect. Fights him. And now Kevin Holland. Like, Jesus, like that's a serious run. But yeah, big shout out to Kevin Stewart. Kevin Stewart, Jesus Christ, I've done a Sean, lad. I've done a Sean. I have done a Sean. I'm also really interested to see Jessica Rose Clark back and see whether she can turn it around. But yeah, is there any? And Tyson Nam. Jesus, Tyson Nam's opening the card. That's interesting. Yeah, any thoughts on this card before we dive into the big one?
It's good. It's very, very solid. Like next weekend's card is really well balanced. A lot of fights that I'm definitely interested in. A lot of fights that affect the rankings. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think after the past few weeks where we've had subpar main events, I think that this is a turn in a positive direction, and we'll build nice momentum going into the 253.
Agree. Sean, any quick thoughts?
I'm literally just interested in watching Khamzat Chimaev start this crazy run that he's supposed to be going on, jumping between middleweight and welterweight. And yeah, I'm just looking to jump on that hype train more and more and more, basically. Until, he comes against a certain opponent and inevitably I end up just being wrong again.
The thing that I find
until Gerard Misha Anaconda chokes him and everyone gets sad and loses all their money.
Yeah. That'd be so tragic.
Like, the thing that interests me the most about Gerald Meerschaert is he has more losses than Khamzat Chimaev has fights.
Yeah.
Now, look, I mean, I want to give a prediction here. Obviously, Sean's going to go Khamzat Chimaev.
I'll go with him for his next 5 fights. That's how much I've jumped on board.
Okay, so you're taking Khamzat Chimaev by what, Sean?
By whatever he wants. Listen, so I looked up...
All right, that'll do. Jesus Christ.
No. He was in a 13-kilo weight division when he was like a little boy. That may be an exaggeration. It may have been 23 kilos, but that's absurd. He's been competing since he didn't even weigh 25 kilos, and he's been wrestling all the way to the title.
Did you see the other day that he was given his blue belt? Imagine.
Yeah.
Imagine you show up to a white belt division, right? A white belt division. Step on the mat and fucking Khamzat Chimaev steps on the mat. You'd be like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ. What are we doing here, lads?
No, I wouldn't want God.
That. No.
The ref calls you to the centre. And he just gives you that smirk. That grin.
Yeah. Imagine
just tap the floor, walk off. You turn up to a Naga,
right? Naga, novice division. Khamzat Chimaev walks on, like, oh my God, I'd be fuming, absolutely fuming. Yeah, Jack, have you got any thoughts about this card or Khamzat Chimaev and Gerald Meerschaert?
So I think Meerschaert's a decent enough test, right? Just because if Khamzat wrestles, Meerschaert is excellent at the front headlock and has like an all-round pretty solid grappling game for MMA, 23 sub wins, right? So I think there could be some interesting scrambles, exchanges. Meerschaert's naturally a lot bigger than him as well. The one thing that gives me a lot of confidence with Chimaev, though, is Meerschaert does wilt. He's a bit of a slow starter. Like Jack Manson got on him early, Thiago Santos, Ian Heinisch, and they finished him fairly quickly. So, yeah, I would like to see Khamzat get tested, maybe taken into deeper waters, so to speak. But yeah, given what we've seen from Meerschaert, I think he's probably going to get whacked.
Jesus Christ. Okay,
that's what it comes down to ultimately. He's just going to get whacked.
We've got Sean dick riding, saying Chimaev by whatever he wants. Jack is offering Chimaev certified whacking. And I'm going to go...
Round one whacking.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I am going to go Gerald Meerschaert because fuck both of you and fuck the hype train. No, I mean, look, I think Khamzat Chimaev looks absolutely amazing, but I wonder whether Gerald Meerschaert has seen enough wrestlers in his time to be able to negate some of the really, really, really incredible offense that we've seen. And then, look, I mean, I would say the grappling experience overall grappling experience is probably with Meerschaert, especially in MMA. So I'd be interested to see whether we're going to see some tricks from Meerschaert that Khamzat Chimaev hasn't seen in the octagon. And And as you say, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised in any shape or form if Khamzat Chimaev wins this and then goes on, fights Damian Maia and gets his back taken in 15 seconds and choked out ruthlessly. But look, these things happen in MMA. But right, let's move on. So 253. This is a phenomenal top 2 fights. And then I'm just really confused how we go from 2 title fights to Hakeem, Dawadu and Zaibara Tukogov. I'm extremely confused, but we are where we are. We'll start with the people's main event. And that's Jeff Hughes, Juan Espino. So Jack, go on, talk to us.
Look, I'm going to be honest. I didn't watch the tough that Espino was on.
Sacrilege.
But I know that he is a 39-year-old heavyweight from the Canary Islands who hasn't fought in 2 years. So I'm going to give this one a big fat pass.
If you look at pictures of Juan Espino, right, it looks like Ricky Martin swallowed a wasp.
Oh,
it looks like Ricky Martin and Kelvin Gastelum's love child.
Yes, that's a great shout. See, the reason why I'm interested in this fight is because I really think that Jeff Hughes is a Sean McGuinness type of fighter.
What does that even mean? Are you trying to say that I'm a fat old man, Harry? What? How disrespectful?
It's because Jeff Hughes looks a bit Polish. That's what he's trying to say, Sean.
Yeah, a little
That's
bit.
it. Yeah. Matt, Eastern European roots.
He's got a little bit of that smackhead about him. It kind of. Fucking hell. All right, let's take a big hard pass on that, and let's move on to the second people's main event, and that's William Knight, Alexa Camur. Jack, have you got anything to say about that? Though, just interestingly, by topology rankings, before you start, William Knight is number 1 light heavyweight in the US, the northeast of the US. I'll have you know, number 1 light heavyweight in the northeast of the US. So there you go. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, Jack, take us away.
It's all good. So I'm actually quite interested in this fight, which says a lot because normally when I hear light heavyweight prospect, I tend to vomit. Both of these guys came up through Contender Series. Both had impressive performances in the Contender Series. Knight actually fought there twice. Both are relatively young in their career, but have not necessarily dodged. They haven't been necessarily can crushing. They've both fought kind of like well balanced, decent opposition thus far. Camur has already debuted and soundly beat Justin Ledet. And William Knight had his second Contender Series fight like 2 weeks ago, and took out Cody Brundage, who's a pretty decent wrestler. Very well matched in terms of athleticism. Both still fairly green. Both are predominantly strikers, although Camur can lean on his wrestling from time to time. Camur is actually fighting out of is it Strong Style?
Strong Style.
I know they've got a pretty abysmal name. I think it's something like Strong Style.
Strong Style.
He fights like a kind of like a green Stipe, really. He's very reliant on his hands, fairly aggressive, mixes in kicks occasionally, maybe a little bit more than we see from Stipe nowadays. And he's obviously got the wrestling to fall back onto as well. Knight is pretty much just a bomber, very aggressive, very powerful. Has proven to not have the best takedown defense, but is not too bad at working his way back up to his feet. I think the deciding factor in this fight is probably going to be Camur's ability to mix it up with takedowns. I think if they're both to stand in the pocket, one of them is going to fall down, and I think most of the time it's going to be 50-50 in terms of how that plays out. I think if Camur is a little bit smarter, uses his jab, maintains a decent pace, I think he can mix things up and get the winner here overnight.
Sean McGuinness, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think Knight, I've not watched huge amounts on both of them. I've seen both of their sort of contenders fights, and Knight does just strike me as more of a bomber, like Jack says, whereas Alexa, that flying knee that he landed in his contenders fight was absolutely ridiculous for a man of that size, especially because I think he actually got dropped just before he landed it. And I think coming out of the Strong Style gym as well, getting to train with Stipe every day, it's just good people to have close by training with. So I'd give Alexa the advantage in that one.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree more. I really liked Alexa's debut against Justin Ledette. Like Justin Ledette is sort of a middling light heavyweight. Like he's okay, he's not terrible, but yeah, as Sean just pointed out, the finish was absolutely disgusting. And I think as well, like when you have a more well-rounded fighter versus, as you guys have said, somebody that's just going to bull rush and try and use a lot of hands. I generally, unless their name is Derek Lewis, I generally will lean on the more technical, well-rounded fighter. Obviously, you can't bet against Derek Lewis because he's the best heavyweight in the world ever.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
I'm just going to ask for your predictions. So, Jack, who have you got in the Alexa Camur fight?
I've got Camur specifically by ground and pound in the second round. That's my guess. That's my guesstimate.
And Sean?
I've got Camur by knockout in the second round. In fact, no, TKO. Okay.
All right. And in the Ricky Martin versus Polish Sean fight, Jack, who've you got?
I've always been a big Ricky Martin fan.
All right.
Ricky Martin via submission in round 1. Goga Plata.
And Jesus fucking Christ. And Sean, who've you got? Are you going to take your Polish brother or not?
I think either someone is going to get knocked out really quickly, or there's just going to be two absolutely exhausted guys just lying on each other for 2 rounds. And you can record that entire prediction because I don't even want to pick a winner, to be honest.
Fine. Well, let's move on to a legitimate fight for once, and that's Nate Landwehr versus Shane Young. I think this is a real sleeper fight, to be truly honest with you. This could be a barn burner. Sean, what have you got for me?
Yeah, I think it could be good. I think Nate Landwehr is up there on my list of most hittable people in the UFC or maybe just combat sports, like generally. He's incredibly good at getting hit repeatedly. And I think in terms of his run, I mean, he got knocked out by Herbert Burns. And then after that, had a bizarre fight with Darren Elkins where, I don't know, he showboated Darren Elkins, who was possibly the only other person outside of Diego Sanchez who was more hittable. I don't actually think anyone won that fight. I think one of them just got hit slightly more, which was Darren Elkins, and Landwehr just shouted at him. And it was just unbelievably weird. But yeah, so that's what I think of Nate. Whereas Shane, I actually rate Shane a lot more. There's a lot of people on this card from City Kickboxing, and I'm sure as we go through, we'll get onto their style later. But I think as a striker, he's a lot more educated in his footwork. He is still very aggressive and he likes to sort of scrap. But when he gets in on the inside and he does start trading, he does it very similar to how Dan Hooker, who's obviously from the same gym, will do it in terms of he'll use that sort of those light tempo punches so he's not overexerting himself. But then when he has like really sort of exhausted guys, then he'll finish them off. I can't remember the name of the guy that he fought, the Asian guy.
Rolando D?
Yeah, that was it. Like that was, you know, he just smashed him with like really decent striking pressure, I thought. So yeah, I think that's the difference. I think that there's going to be a difference shown quite early in terms of striking with Shane Young. And Nate's going to be there all night for him to hit.
Jack?
Yeah, I'm completely on board with Sean, as always. This is a very, very easy fight to predict, in my opinion. Both like to strike. One actually fights sensibly. And the other one is literally a punch magnet, isn't he? So give me the guy who's more technical, who actually fights with some form and consistency and is actually conscious of defence over Mr. Landwehr.
Yeah, I agree. I think City Kickboxing are going to put on probably an excellent display on Saturday night. And I think we're going to see some guys really come out of their pride, really come out and shine, And, you know, we will get into when we get to the Izzy fight and when we get to the Brad Riddell fight, we'll talk about their styles. But, yeah, I mean, I think Shane Young is a promising fighter. Obviously, he made his UFC debut against Alexander Volkanovski, and I mean these things happen, right? What are you going to do? But yeah, I'm excited for this fight. I think it should be a Shane Young battering, to be honest. Jack, what have you got?
I think if Sherbert Burns can knock out Nate Landwehr,
oh my God, Sherbert Burns.
I think Shane Young will as well. So yeah, first or second round knockout.
And Sean?
Yeah, I'm the same. I think first round knockout.
Perfect. All right. So I am drastically excited for the next one. I went back and watched Brad Riddell perform, and I before I saw Brad Riddell perform, I actually listened to an interview with Eugene Berman, his coach, talking about Brad, and he said that he's the only fighter that he's ever managed that can fight better going backwards than he can going forwards. And that's how he likes to fight in his kickboxing bouts, is he prefers to fight backwards instead of forwards. And I thought that was interesting because he doesn't actually do a lot of that in his MMA fighting. He prefers to be on the front foot. He prefers to be attacking. And I kind of get that, because if you're going backwards, you may be more susceptible to the cage, and you may be more susceptible to getting taken down in the cage. Alex de Silva is an interesting fighter. He's an interesting fighter because previously on his record, he's had more like striking battles and more KOs than he has subs. Yet in his 2 fights, they've been essentially jiu-jitsu matches and wrestling matches. And he's impressed me with both. He has a really good top game when he does get there. He forces people to turn and give their back quite well. He has good scrambles. His takedowns are okay. His takedown defense is okay. So what this is going to seem like to me is Brad Riddell's going to come in and strike, essentially. And Alex de Silva will do his best to take Brad down and keep him there. The one thing that I was impressed with Brad Riddell was, in some of his fights, he uses the whizzer really, really well. And if he does get taken down, he manages to use that whizzer and a lot of shoulder pressure to get straight back up. And then he can land his knees, and it's effectively a tie clinch, right? That's how he tries to make it. So I really like this fight. I think there is a massive experience gap. Alex Silva's had 23 fights to Brad Riddell's 9, but obviously Brad Riddell's got an extensive kickboxing career, so it's not like combat sports is alien to him. But yeah, I like this fight. I think Brad Riddell is a good example of that city kickboxing style, which is pressure kickboxing. It's solid takedown defense. And yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm going to go with a Brad Riddell unanimous decision. Alex de Silva, in all the fights that I watched, is tough and is durable, and he has a gas tank for days. So I'd be impressed if Brad Riddell does finish him, but I'm going to take Brad Riddell by unanimous decision. Sean, have you got any thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I think it's a really good matchup as well. Just to jump on something you were saying about Alex de Silva having a good top game when he gets there. I think against Brad Riddell, getting a clean takedown and then being able to hold him down are both tough ass. Like,
Agree.
I was actually extremely surprised and impressed with his performance against Magomed Mustafayev. Yeah. I thought the amount that he managed to not only get his striking off once he'd sort of warmed into the fight, but also when he was on his back, he's very good at fighting hands, and he does all the right things to get up off the ground, without... even when Magomed was sort of chaining to other takedowns, he knew the sequences that Magomed was going for, and he could stop them and then break off and start striking again. And yeah, as a striker, I really rate him as well. He actually did a really interesting interview with Luke Thomas recently, where he was breaking down one of the things that all the city kickboxing guys do. And he was talking about, I don't know if you've heard of like an L step in boxing, but for anyone listening, it's essentially you step in the shape of an L to the outside of like the power foot to sort of negate an opponent's like big right hand or leg kick and everything else. So if you watch all the city kickboxing guys, none of them, or very rarely, will they ever pivot towards the right hand or go towards the power side. And I think Brad Riddell's really good at doing that. So I think on the feet, it's going to be very hard to hurt him because he's got, like I said, very complex sort of game and very educated feet. And I think to take him down, to be honest, unless you're an elite wrestler, I think he's going to have a hard time because I was so impressed with his fight against Magomed.
Jack?
Ever the pessimist, I don't actually like this matchmaking, and that's not Brad Riddell's fault, right? I think he should have got a bigger step up in competition. I actually think this is a step back in competition, considering he just beat Magomed Mustafayev. Alex de Silva's fighting out of Astra Fight Team. You might know them for having a couple of other fighters who fought in big promotions who've got padded records. There was Julio Cesar Neves, who fought in Bellator a couple of years ago, who was like 33-0. And then last year on PFL, there was Luis Laurentino, who was also like 32-0, coming from the same gym. And Coincidentally, it was also Darren Till's gym back in the day when he trained in Brazil, and
Oh, no way.
they've been known that gym also runs a promotion in Brazil called Aspira, and they tend to pad their guys' records up, especially when they're starting up. So that's why you see De Silva, for example, walking in here with 21 wins and 2 losses.
Mhm.
I think he's got decent potential at 24. I don't necessarily think he's a bad fighter by all means, but I think that Brad Riddell is significantly better. I can't see De Silva getting him down, and I think that he is significantly outgunned on the feet as well. So I would have rather seen Brad Riddell get a bit more of a step up. Maybe someone like Rafael Fiziev or a Nasrat Hakparas, someone of that caliber. I think he's ready for
I'm
it.
not sure. I'm not sure. I think he's 8-1.
But I think
Take
he's got
time.
all the kickboxing background.
Yeah, he's a very
when
good
you've got
kickboxer.
Yeah, that's fine.
When you've got that
but
background, you can skip the queue a little bit. And
I don't
he's
know.
not young either. He's 29. So I would have been happy if he just beat Mustafayev, who was like 15 and something. He's got wins over. He beat Keenan Song as well, who's a decent UFC welterweight before he joined the UFC, right? So he's beaten guys with experience. I don't necessarily foresee that being an issue, but yeah, at the very least, it should add nicely to his highlight reel and keep the momentum going.
All right. So can you give me a pick, Jack?
Yeah. I'm going to go with Brad Riddell via knockout.
And in what round or in what fashion?
I'm going to go round 1.
All right. Cool. Sean?
I'm going to go round 2, knockout Brad Riddell.
All right. So we're going to go to the saddest fight on the card next, and that is Diego Sanchez versus Jake Matthews. Jack, go on.
Yeah, in my notes on this, I just wrote drab. It's not the worst possible match, right? Like, I think, thankfully, we're not all going to cringe and look away at our TV as Diego Sanchez gets face planted once again.
Do you reckon?
I don't think that's going to happen. No, I think Jake Matthews has only really shown. I've only really seen. I could be wrong here, but the only time I recall him actually knocking someone down was Wagner Rocha back in the day. Yeah, I think that this could look a bit like the Mike Chiesa fight. Diego Sanchez has obviously performed better recently against grapplers. If you think about the Jim Miller fight, Mickey Gall, Marcin Held, and Craig White as well. But those guys were either a weight class below in Held and Miller, or Mickey Gall and Craig White, who probably aren't UFC caliber, if we're being honest with ourselves. Jake Matthews is a bit of a failed prospect. He showed a lot at a young age, but hasn't really necessarily built on those skills. He's a decent grappler. He's a decent striker. He's got decent wrestling, but does nothing really outstanding. I think that he's probably just gonna out hustle Diego for this. I think he's probably just gonna beat him in the wrestling exchanges and probably win this fight from top position. But I just don't expect it to be particularly entertaining. And anytime I see Diego Sanchez's name on a lineup now, it is normally met with a degree of sadness. So yeah, not particularly looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think Diego is a sad story for me. It feels like he is a fighter he's almost so vulnerable at this point that his personal life has really, really inflicted his decision-making now in his career. I think that I don't think it's necessarily ever a bad thing when somebody finds religion or whatever, but I think Diego's application of that, if you follow him on social media, for instance, a lot of what he's saying is it's sort of bit part thoughts and it's kind of not very well thought out and it seems very knee-jerk reaction. And obviously his well-esteemed corner man that somehow saw an extremely different fight to what the world saw in his outing against Chiesa is just a bit of a virus, to be honest, and I think when you're somebody like Diego, who is a legend of our sport, right, and is a UFC Hall of Famer in the future for the wars and everything else that he put on, I really don't need to see him fighting what's Jake Matthews, 25, 26, like 26. I don't need to see him fighting a 26 half prospect at this point. If he's going to be fighting anyone, it should be like a Gray Maynard or, somebody like that that's around his size, around his age, and essentially around his skill level at this point. Sean?
Yeah, no, I agree with you two. I mean, the situation Diego's in at the moment is by far one of the weirdest in all of MMA. Like, it's one thing turning to religion, but like, I'm kind of afraid that guy isn't nearly involved in some sort of cult. Like, the guy, his cornerman, like you say, their perception of what's happening in these fights is so far removed from reality. Like, these posts that they were putting up about their defensive tactics against Diego Ferreira, like, he was lucky to get out of there, the way, and even then, it was terrible. But I think he's got I've forgotten the name of his cornerman now, but the guy that's managing his career, I think, is a bit of a leech, to be honest. I think it doesn't look good. One thing I do agree with in terms of what Jack was saying about Jake Matthews, I don't think he's the most dangerous prospect. I think there's going to be a size difference on the night. But one thing about Diego Sanchez, even though I think we may even be quite far past that now, is that he's definitely over the hill, but sometimes he's beaten like young guys coming up because he isn't quite as over the hill as we thought, especially when he uses his grappling. Like, I think what people forget with Diego Sanchez is he actually has like a really legit grappling pedigree. Like,
sure.
The dude's had like a match against Marcelo Garcia during in my opinion, one of Marcelo's best ADCCs. And, if you look at his fights against Martin Held, I didn't give him a chance of winning that. And he just completely smashed him. The same with Mickey Gall, like just out-grappled him over the course. So, it's really, he obviously didn't become known for that. He became known for the Gilbert Melendez fights and just, getting punched loads. But he has a really legit grappling pedigree. So if there was any sort of way he could get through this in one piece or have a surprising decision, I think it would be using his grappling. But yeah, I think the fact that he's now moved away from an MMA gym to hang out with this
Joshua Fabia.
Yeah, Joshua Fabia guy who, I mean, we could just do a podcast on that guy. That's a different, kettle of fish completely. But yeah, I don't think it bodes well. And I think eventually that sort of breakdown is going to just show more and more and more.
Yes, I agree. Do I even need to ask for official picks or?
I'm just going to take Jake Matthews, and hopefully it's not in some horrendous stoppage, basically.
Yeah, Jack.
Yeah, I think Jake Matthews by decision. I actually, I was thinking about it for a moment, and when Sean was talking about Diego's grappling, I was just thinking like, maybe Jake Matthews tends to tire a little bit welterweight. Maybe Diego could have a bit of a resurgence in this fight. But then just also thinking back to those 4 wins we mentioned a moment ago: Marcin Held, Jim Miller, Mickey Gall, and also Craig White. They are all guys as well who are willing to fight off their back. And I think that's why Diego's seen success. He's pretty good at stifling guard players, and yeah, I don't think Jake Matthews is going to give him that kind of fight. Jake Matthews, lopsided decision, maybe some 10-8s in there.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. Jack, Kepler Vieira, Mariam Renault. This is a good fight, I think.
This is a good fight. Mariam Renault started MMA really late, but she's proven to be decent. She's played spoiler a couple of times, right? She had that the triangle win over Sarah McMahon.
Yep.
She has also beaten Talita Bernardo as well. That was a fairly late stoppage. And she subbed Jess Andrade in her UFC debut. I think the issue for Mariam Renault has always been the wrestling. She's not a bad striker. She's pretty long for the weight class. She's a jiu-jitsu black belt, very dangerous guard. I think the issue tends to be for her, she's not a particularly adept wrestler, and she is also fairly old. She's 43. She probably is the oldest lady on the roster.
Yes.
And I think even in some of her good wins, they were fights where she had to come back in, right? They weren't necessarily her dominating from the offset. Kepler Vieira, a really, really decent prospect. in the bantamweight division, was on a really good run, was unbeaten, and came up against Irene Aldana last time out after nearly 2 years on the shelf, and got highlighted in one of the best female knockouts in recent memory. She got whacked. I think Kepler Vieira still has quite a lot of potential in this weight class, to be honest. She's incredibly physical. She's a really good grappler. She obviously needs to do a little bit of work tidying up her striking and bringing that onto the same level. But yeah, I think although Vieira is coming off of a loss, I think that these women are probably going to go on kind of opposite trajectories in terms of their careers, right? I expect Vieira to be a mainstay in that women's bantamweight division. And I think that this may well be the last time we see Marion Renault fighting at this level. I think Vieira is good enough on top. Well, I think she's good enough to not only take Renault down, but to kind of stay out of trouble from her guard and potentially work towards her own submissions as well. So yeah, feeling fairly confident in Kepler Vieira.
Sean?
Yeah, I'm the same. I think the age of Marion Renault, I think we spoke about it the last time she was fighting. She was actually turned away from competing on Tough 18, literally just because she was too old, because they said there's no way. So in one sense, she's exceeded all expectations, and, you know, she has done really well. And her last fight, you know, she still looks good. She's still hanging with these girls like Raquel Pennington. But I think my biggest issue is I just can't see her as a prospect. I can't see her at this point having an upward trajectory and winning a title. I just can't see it. Whereas on the other hand, with Vieira, I could absolutely see her making a run. I think Irene Aldana is a real rough matchup for anyone right now in that ladies division. You know, we've spoken about that already. But yeah, I think this should be a pretty easy one for Kepler.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, Irene Aldana lost a split decision to Raquel Pennington, and I mean, that was dubious, right? That was definitely dubious. And from there, you know, now she's fighting the likes of Holly Holm. And I mean, Holly Holm is an interesting one, right? Holly Holm is somebody that's also kind of going in a different direction to Irene Aldana. But yeah, I think Irene Aldana is a very good fighter. Kepler Vieira, I agree. I essentially have nothing to add for you guys, to be honest. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think Kepler Vieira takes this fight relatively simply, to be honest. And then I'll be very interested to see what you do with Kepler Vieira after that. I mean, look, she's already got wins over Sarah McMahon and Ashley Evans-Smith. So, and Zingano. Oh yeah, it was nice to see Kat Zingano win a Bellator the other day. That was good. I like Kat Zingano. So yeah, I'd be interested to see what happens. But if I can get some official picks.
Yeah. I'm going to take Vieira by decision. I think she's only got that one stoppage thus far in the UFC over Sarah McMahon. Yeah. And Renault is yet to be finished. So, yeah, that's my pick.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, Renault is really tough. So I'm going by Vieira by decision as well.
I think that's probably a safe decision. We move on to what I think is probably fight of the night. And that's Kai Kara-France versus Brandon Royval. Sean, do you have any thoughts on that for us?
Yeah, I really, really like this fight. I was, first of all, just starting with Brandon Royval. I was really impressed with how he handled I'm pretty sure it was his debut against Tim Elliott, because...
Who makes a debut against Tim fucking Elliott? Who doesn't?
I know, in flyweight as well. Because, but the thing that impressed me the most is, I think you could fit Brandon into that category of fighters, like the scramble sort of fighters. So people like Tim Elliott, who... they'll almost put themselves in some bad positions, but they either attack so much or they understand how to win those scrambles that they'll exhaust opponents, then beat them. Like, if you watch Brandon Royval's fight against Nate Williams in, I think it was LFC, he is chaos and speed from the opening bell. I think he opened that up with a flying knee, and 2 seconds later he was in an omoplata, you know. So chaos is the thing with Brandon Royval. And the fact that he managed to eventually, it was very back and forth, don't get me wrong, but eventually out-scramble Tim Elliott and arm triangle him was massively, massively impressive, to be honest, especially as a debut. On the other hand, with Kai Kara-France, I think he's a much more measured fighter. We were talking about the L-step before, and he's obviously not from the same gym, he's from Hawaii, but Kai Kara-France L-steps all the time. Like, he's never going towards your power, and I think part of that is he controls the pace of the fight. And then as the fight goes on, you know, he sort of snowballs, he'll sort of land more strikes and then get a decision. What this is going to come down to for me is Brandon going to be able to bring this fight into a sort of chaotic realm early on? Or is Kai Kara going to be able to use that footwork, because he has really, really good feet, and be able to slow the pace down until he can start winning the fight on his own terms? I think if it gets chaotic with Brandon Royval and it starts off as that sort of a fight, I couldn't see Kai winning this, to be honest.
So Kai Kara-France is definitely from New Zealand and not Hawaii. And he also definitely trains at Sea Kickboxing.
He does train at Sea Kickboxing. Okay.
Yes, he does.
I was like, I actually thought he looked like such a City Kickboxing fighter, but
yeah, he is. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So my thoughts on this fight are that I like Kai Kara-France. I think he's a good fighter. I think the big thing to take from his only loss, his only loss in the UFC proper, is Brandon Moreno is also a bit of a chaos fighter. Right now, Brandon Moreno is pretty big for the weight class, but he is a chaos type fighter. And I think that Brandon Royval, in his showing against Tim Elliott, showed a really good gas tank. I mean, Tim Elliott did not show a good gas tank, and that's something that we've kind of got used to with Tim Elliott. Is he has a really good one scrambly round, and then from there, if Lewis Smoker isn't against you and you don't gas out, then you're going to be ground, right? So yeah, I think the thing that impresses me massively, as you've already touched on, Sean, is his hands and his footwork, and those were shown really, really well against Mark De La Rosa. For me, I think De La Rosa is a decent enough fighter, but the thing that really got me was Tyson Nam. So Tyson Nam came in and just whacks people, just blams everyone, and he was measured. He was really he took that fight really, really well, and I was really impressed. I think Brandon Royval is a bit of a bad matchup, however, because if you've got a good gas tank and you're going to force a scrambly, awkward, difficult pace, and he's a grappler too, right? Like, the way to stop a scrambly grappler is to dominate them, right? And I don't think Kai Kara-France has got too much punching power to really stop the scrambliness of Brandon Royval. But Jack, maybe you think I'm wrong. Go on.
No, I'm on board. I actually thought I was going to be the only one coming on here to talk about how much I love Brandon Royval, but it's nice that you guys have joined me, and following on from my claims and dislikes of Jake Matthew, I didn't want to get labelled an Anzac basher. But I thought Kai Kara-France is a little bit overrated, to be honest. I feel like his cardio isn't fantastic. He tends to drop off a little bit. And given the level of opposition he's fought thus far, I thought he would have had more impressive performances and perhaps a finish as well. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at some of the guys he's fought Elias Garcia, Mark De La Rosa, not
good fighters.
Not particularly. I wouldn't say they're good, actually. I'd say they're very much at the bottom end of flyweight, and in all of those fights he kind of coasted, right? I think that the comparison to Brandon Moreno is very accurate. I think he's very chaotic, and I think he will bring a similar kind of pace to the match that Moreno did. And yeah, I definitely like Royval here too as well. I think he's a little bit more lanky. He's got a bit of a reach advantage, which I think will help mitigate the striking a little bit. And I think if he's able to get Kai Kara-France onto his back, I think he will enjoy a lot of success. So definitely looking forward to this one.
Sean?
Yeah, I think I'm going with Brandon Royval as well, with some crazy like omoplata off his back after a couple of flying knees.
I don't know what to say to you. Jack, what have you got?
Royval by decision.
All right. So we now move. I mean, I'm just a bit confused at how short this card is. Like, we're already at the top three cards, right? Top three fights now. So Hakeem Dawadu versus Zaibara Tukogov. This is an interesting fight for me, and one that, to be honest, I'd have put Kai Kara-France above this just because I don't understand how these two guys are in the top three, right? Like, Zaibara is all right. Like he won a decision against Lerone. Oh, sorry, it was a draw, wasn't it? A draw against Lerone Murphy. Lost to Renato Moicano. To be honest, for me, I thought Lerone Murphy won that fight. I didn't think Zaibara did enough on the ground to really score, but I thought Lerone Murphy did enough damage on the feet to win. And then, he went off and just blamed Kevin Aguilar. Fine, these things happen. Hakeem Dawadu he's just a bit of a weird one for me. Like, he came in with all the hype, then got absolutely wrecked by Danny Henry with that disgusting high elbow guillotine. And then from there, he's put 4 wins together. But I don't know. Do you, Jack, do you want to take us away with some thoughts?
It's a decent fight. I agree. The positioning with it on the card is slightly suspect. Zaibara joined and had a lot of hype, obviously, because he's Habib's boy, and unfortunately, a lot of his momentum was lost when he had to sit on the shelf for a couple of years, thanks to that incident. Since coming back, he's looked decent. I think the Kevin Aguilar win's actually a pretty good one. I think Kevin Aguilar's a bit of a sleeper in that division, and I didn't think, considering the layoff, he looked too bad against Lerone Murphy, right? Who's actually proven himself to be quite the prospect since. Mr. Hakeem Dawadu, again, a lot of momentum when he joined, had a really good run in World Series of Fighting. A lot of that momentum was halted when he got quickly slept in that beautiful guillotine by Danny Henry. But he's since then come back to win 4 straight, and he's looking to have found his form again. I think the one deciding factor for this fight really comes down to Tukogov's wrestling. Hakeem is very much one note, and albeit that is quite a beautiful note, he's Muay Thai specialist, but you never really see much more out of him than that. Whereas Zaibara, very good hands, very quick, but he's also got the wrestling to fall back on as well, which he used to close the gap against Lerone. So I think if Zaibara can wrestle and mix things up, I like him to win a decision. If he wants to stick to trade in the pocket for the entire fight, I think it's going to be much closer and could likely go either way.
Sure.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. One reason I find this fight quite difficult to predict is I think that both of them have tools that have proven, sort of difficult for the other one to overcome in other fights. So from a striking perspective, especially like they're very different fighters. Like Hakeem, you can very much tell that he comes from a Thai boxing background. Like over this sort of 4-fight streak that he's been on, he very much fights at his own pace from a square stance. And he has very nice leg kicks, and he'll sort of just chop people off at range and sort of avoid as much as he can getting pressured by other people. Yep. Whereas Zaibara just sort of bounces in and out. He's very like someone like Gunnar Nelson. Like every so often he'll blitz him with like a big right hand or a big combination. Then he goes back to the outside, and sort of gets back to his distance. And I think it's interesting because if you look at Zaibara versus Moicano, leg kicks were one of the things that did give him issues, like bouncing in and out and having such a footwork heavy style. And then on the other side of that, when Hakeem was just ran through by Danny Henry, I'm pretty sure that was like a big right hand that sort of set that scramble to the guillotine in motion. And I really think Hakeem is a guy that likes to work at his own distance. And if he can't work at his own distance, then someone like Zaibara, who's quite unpredictable, could give him problems.
I think that the biggest comparison that I find when I watch Hakeem Dawadu is he reminds me a little bit of Daniel Tamer, in the same vein that he has that longer striking style. Obviously, Daniel Tamer is more than happy to stand and bang also, but Daniel Tamer has those frailties, and if you find those frailties, you're probably going to beat him. To me, I think this fight is basically as beautiful as you guys have set it up. I'll be interested to see what Dawadu has learned now at SBG, now having a good amount of time at SBG. Obviously, he's got good coaches there and he's got good training partners. And he has a good wrestling coach in Sergey. But let's see. I don't know. I'm going to take Tukogov. And I'm going to take Tukogov because I think the wrestling is just swaths of experience difference, right? And I think that I actually disagree with Jack. I don't think Zaibara's got great hands. I think he's got heavy hands, and I think he as you say, Sean, he blitzes in to get to wrestling. And then when he gets to wrestling, you're in a world of trouble, right? Like anyone that comes from that Khabib camp is going to have good wrestling. Maybe not Khabib level wrestling, but good wrestling. Good enough wrestling that they're gonna give you some trouble. And I think that, you know, no disrespect to Danny Henry, but if you're getting blammed by Danny Henry in a disgusting guillotine and not having really any fashion of control to get out or even reverse or anything, then somebody like Zaibara is probably going to give you a hard time. So I'm taking Zaibara, and I'm going to take him via 3rd round stoppage. Jack, who do you have?
I've got Zaibara via decision.
And Sean?
Yeah, just a really quick thing with the Zaibara like grappling things. I do agree his wrestling's a lot better, but I don't think that his takedown game works in harmony very much with his striking game. Like, he does have that sort of Khabib brand of wrestling, but he isn't a pressure striker like Khabib or someone like Islam Makhachev that cuts it off. He's a very strange fighter to watch because he strikes in a way where he dances around at a distance. And then sometimes, because he's the one with his back against the cage, he'll actually struggle to get his takedowns off, like you saw later on in the Leron Murphy fight and his fight against Moicano, because he's shooting from there. So I still think it's a really confusing one. But I think because of the right hand and the unpredictability, I could see him actually winning more with striking, to be honest, than wrestling. So I'm going to go with Zaibara. 2nd round TKO.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right. Sean, if you want to break down the co-main event for us.
Yeah, so this one's it's been quite good going back and watching sort of these guys' fights again, especially Jan Blachowicz, just because
he's your Polish brother.
Because he's my Polish brother now. I've been to the country. I've spoken. We actually had a Polish guide. Shout out to Maciek from Scramble for showing us around Poland. And Jan Blachowicz is just like a hero over there. And to be honest, going back through his fights, I think as a striker, he actually is a lot better than I remembered him from watching his fights. I think even against guys like Alex Gustafsson, before Gustafsson started doing the wrestling, there's a couple of things I think he does as a light heavyweight that makes him quite unique. So, for example, against Gustafsson, he strikes quite well in combination. I think that was one of the things that led to Gustafsson rarely sort of shooting takedowns for most of the fight. Especially for a light heavyweight, it's very rare that they'll throw a 2-piece and then, you know, follow it up with a 3-piece and a 4-piece. But Jan will do that time to time. Now, thinking of him standing across from Dominic Reyes, I think it's a terrible matchup for Jan, a terrible, terrible matchup.
I agree.
Just because he is very good at combination striking, but he fights again from that square tie stance. And one thing that stance sort of leaves you at a bit of a disadvantage with is closing the distance on someone that uses a lot of boxing footwork. Something that makes Dominic Reyes so dangerous is that he will create a gap between you and force you to close the gap. And then after you've overextended yourself, he'll knock you out. And I think that, especially when you think of his win against Jared Cannonier, there's a striker there that is much better on paper than Dominic Reyes, but that counter style, especially because of how long he is and how, I hate to say athletic, because he never stops talking about what an athlete he is, and it's just terrible to listen to, but he is very athletic, and when he's at a distance, he's very, very good at getting these light heavyweights to overextend. And the one time Jan Blachowicz was knocked out quite badly was against oh man, who was it against? I can't remember, but it was in that scenario where he was closing the distance.
Thiago Santos.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. And Thiago hits him with a really nice check right hook and just put him out cold. So yeah, I think this is a really bad matchup for Jan. And maybe it's just because I've been to Poland, but yeah, it's a shame. I like Jan.
I actually agree. I think the thing that strikes me about Dom Reyes, and again, he talks about this a lot, is he's actually quite an intelligent fighter, right? Like he's not fighting purely from a technical understanding of how to fight. He's approaching the fight as if it were a mathematical equation as well. And sure, he is self-branded the best athlete that's ever walked the planet. But, you know, we're in a situation where he's shown against arguably the greatest of all time that he can hang in there and arguably win the fight, right? And you don't beat John Jones just by blamming him, right? You've got to out cardio him, you've got to out technique him, but you've also got to outsmart him. And I thought that at times Dom did that really, really well. Now, Jan is obviously vastly experienced, and he's obviously got some amazing wins on his record. Cannonier, I think Cannonier, anyone that's beaten Jared Cannonier, that is aging so well. Do you know what I mean? Like, Jared Cannonier is an absolute monstrosity of a fighter now. Jimmy Manuwa, obviously a UK legend. Nikita Krylov, another failed prospect. But Luke Rockhold, you know, that's a big win. Jack's favorite fighter ever. Ronaldo Souza, Jacare, like, that's a great fight. Corey Anderson, I think, is a huge win for Jan Blachowicz. Not just a huge win, but a knockout win against Corey Anderson, I think, is a huge win. And now we're setting up the Dom Reyes. Like, for me, Jan is a very good striker, but he's also quite one-dimensional in his striking. You know what's coming, right? You know what's coming, and it's. I don't mean this to be negative, but basic combinations, whether it be a 2 or 3 or a 4-piece, but you're not seeing vastly interesting angles. You're not seeing vastly interesting diversity in strikes. You're seeing good striking, solid striking, but you're seeing it come in a similar fashion. And I think that against somebody like Dom Reyes, who makes reads so quickly and so intelligently, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to offer more than one thing. And I think that's where we're going to see some struggling from Jan. Jack, what have you got?
Yeah, I agree. It's a bit of a nightmare matchup for Sean's uncle. I think that the Thiago Santos fight is, I think it's going to look fairly similar. And I think I'm glad Sean brought that up, because that was kind of the first thing I thought of when this was made. I think Blachowicz' only chance is to try and bully Reyes against the cage and maybe hopefully cut him off and land a big bomb. But other than that, I think he's going to be on the wrong end. I think everything that he throws, Reyes is going to have an answer for. I think Reyes is much quicker, and I don't know if Blachowicz is going to be able to mix it up with the wrestling either. So yeah, I'm fairly confident with Dominic Reyes here.
So Sean, can you give us a pick, please?
Yeah, I think Dominic Reyes, closing moments of the first round, wins by knockout.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
How are you going to do your uncle like that?
I know. I feel terrible because, as you guys
Uncle
mentioned,
Jan.
by going on a holiday, I'm now the nephew of Jan Blachowicz, which is incredible. I don't know how that's happened, but I'm sorry, Uncle.
Have you told your dad that you're going to change your name to Sean Cisnacki from now on?
I'm just going to add a Z at the end of my surname. I'm going to change the last S of my surname just to a Z, and I feel like that'll give me the Eastern European identity.
You've got the haircut and the beard, so we're rolling. Jack, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm with Sean again. Dominic Reyes, first round knockout.
Man, I think that's probably a bit rude, to be honest. I think that Jan is way more durable than that, frankly. I think round 2 or round 3, if he's going to get finished, because I think he's way more durable than that. But both of you are obviously Eastern European haters, so we'll move on to.
Don't say that. They're scary people. I will not. They will.
Mate, you're the one that's got to go to your home country and fucking figure this shit out when Jan loses, not me.
I'm exiled now. Fuck.
So we're going to move on to what I think has got the potential to be one of the best fights ever, but I probably don't see it happening like that. I sent a very drunken, very disheveled Sean about 2,000 words of notes on me watching.
Which was hard considering I couldn't read probably 4 words in the state that I was in.
One, because they weren't in Polish, so I apologize for that. But also because there was a lot of content there. But yeah, I mean, look, I spent a lot of time watching Izzy and watching Costa, and I'm gonna just quickly skip over the notes that I have. And the thing that became abundantly clear is that Costa is an improving fighter, but is still a very much a one-dimensional fighter. His absolute best work comes when he pressures you against the fence, and he's going to throw absolutely all of that 185 pounds of horse meat against you and see what sticks. Like, the thing that's so interesting about the way Costa's fighting style is he has a laser right foot, right? His teep is beautiful. His right roundhouse kick is beautiful. His low leg kicks are beautiful with his right leg. He hit Yoel Romero with an absolute cannon of a right head kick, and Yoel just looked at him like he was eating Cocoa Pops, right? Like it was nothing. And, like that was unbelievable. But when it comes to his actual striking with his upper body, it's pretty trash, right? He throws hooks just to throw them. He throws them in the area of your face and just sees what happens. His head movement is almost non-existent. Like his lateral movement doesn't really exist either. And the way he cuts off the cage isn't great too. But what he does have is size and pressure and mass and power, right? And
he's extremely good looking.
I mean,
that is an X factor. That really is an X factor.
Let's call it how it is.
I don't think Izzy's too bad looking. Let's be honest.
Come on, if you had to choose, it's a no-brainer.
If I had to choose,
those Portuguese commercials, like he's that level.
If I had to choose, I'm going to have to go with Uncle Jan. Otherwise, Sean will beat me up. So, yeah. But in comparison, Izzy is also a fighter that's improving drastically, but I maybe have a controversial opinion here. I didn't see an impressive Izzy against Rob Whittaker. And let me explain.
Oh my God.
The finish itself was phenomenal, right? Phenomenal. And Izzy made beautiful reads in that Rob Whittaker fight. Beautiful reads. But it felt like he was working at like 70% of his capability. And I wonder how much of that was because of the damage that he took in the Gastelum fight. Because I went and watched the Gastelum fight. And in that fight, that's one of the best performances I've seen from anyone, really. I thought he looked phenomenal after getting rocked in the first round as he did. Coming back and producing the display that he did was unbelievable. Probably half of my 2,000 word commentary to Sean was the fifth round, right? Just the fifth round commentary of what Izzy managed to pull off in that fight. But in the Rob Whittaker fight, he got clipped early with a couple of right hands, and he noticed immediately that the left counter was there, right? And he did some amazing things. He countered Rob's right foot stamp by stepping back and immediately firing back with a kick. All of that was beautiful. But the footwork that he usually imposes to negate a lot of the blitzing, because let's be honest, Rob Whittaker has blitzing and he's really, really good at it, but that's what he does, right? He blitzes you to start all the offense, whether it be his right hand, whether it be his takedowns, whatever it is. But I felt like Izzy got caught more than he would have wanted in that Rob Whittaker fight. Now, of course, he was always moving away from the shots and whatever, but I felt like there was some frustration that Izzy wasn't able to impart the game plan that he wanted. Now, the way that Costa is going to win this fight, in my opinion, is getting Izzy to the fence and landing those strikes. I think if you're going to beat Izzy, it has to be by pressuring him and not allowing him to produce the footwork that he can. The argument I give for that is Uriah Hall versus Costa. Uriah Hall was beating the shit out of Paulo Costa until he wasn't. And I think, go on, Sean, fucking hell, I can't even, with that look that you're giving me, I can't not ask you.
Harry, I just don't understand how. So, the Rob Whittaker fight, okay?
Yeah.
He literally did a breakdance routine before he even got to the cage with a group of dancers, and then got in and knocked out one of the best middleweights that there was around.
Sure.
You know, and I just don't see how that's not just wildly impressive.
I mean, look, I don't think it's an accurate comparison to say that what he did outside of the cage has any significance of what he did on inside of the cage.
He did a backflip.
Who gives a fuck?
Backflip and then walked in.
He definitely
destroyed.
does. He definitely does.
Like
if he'd done like an Anthony Joshua walkout and he just got elevated by some flames and didn't really do anything, fair enough. He did a backflip and just went in and destroyed one of the best middleweights around. Like that. Oh my God.
I think that maybe this is me having a a difficult, like from watching Izzy's fights in the run up to that Gastelum fight, all of them were essentially flawless, right? Essentially flawless. Now, and this is not taking away anything from the Whittaker matchup, but he didn't look flawless against Whittaker. And okay, the knockdown at the end of the first round was wonderful, but that came off a Whittaker stumble. And then we saw what happened in the second round, right? Like, it ended quickly. I'm not saying that I'm picking Costa, because I'm definitely not. But I think that there is a route to beat Izzy, and that route is pressure fighting and making him respect your power. And I think this is the only weakness I see for Izzy's game against Costa. The reason why Costa didn't put Romero away is, one, because he's super tough, and the other because Romero made Costa pay with lax striking against the fence. He hurt Costa against the fence when his back was against it. I'm not sure that Izzy has the one punch power that Romero has, right? And I don't want to see Izzy with his back against the fence. But Sean, go on, break down this fight for me.
No, so you actually did in there. You actually made one like really good point about
one way.
Sean. Just one, though.
About how Costa could potentially win this. But I'll start with what you were saying about pressure first of all, because I think that is the crux, to be honest, in terms of this matchup. So, in terms of pressure, I think Izzy has made a career essentially out of fighting guys with really good pressure fighting and pressure boxing. Like in Glory, he really sort of broke the mold in terms of most of the guys that sort of fight for Glory. It's very Dutch kickboxing. It's very come forward with a lot of pressure, a lot of combinations. And Izzy was one of the only guys that you see who used like boxing footwork, mixed it in with all of his kicks, and sort of negated a lot of that power. And I think that's one of the key things of this matchup, to be honest. Like we talk about the L-stepping, but I think actually out of city kickboxing, Izzy still has some of the best evasive footwork out of any of them. Like he also switches to southpaw to sort of take away that that sort of power right hand and stuff like that of his opponents. The point that I thought you made that was really, really good was the right kick of Paulo Costa. And the reason I thought it was really good is because one of the guys in Glory, when Izzy was fighting there, that really gave him struggles striking-wise, was a guy called Jason Wilness. And essentially what Jason did was he just wouldn't engage in the boxing at all, and just from a distance would counter everything Izzy did with either a right low kick or a right body kick, and just it really nullified the footwork and also slowed down the sort of counter punching of Izzy. So I think that would be a good route to go, because Paulo, he does have a good right body kick. You know, he has a tool there, but ultimately I think you've got someone that is an okay pressure fighter who had a bit of a padded record to get to the top in Paulo, against someone who I think is one of the best evasive fighters and counter punchers in MMA right now.
I agree. Jack, what have you got?
So you guys have pretty much savaged this matchup, and there's not much left for me to pick at, really. But yeah, agree with the sentiment that if Costa's going to have any success at a distance, especially because he's going to be on the wrong side of Adesanya's 8-inch reach advantage, he needs to be kicking as much as possible, and hopefully bullying Adesanya to the cage. Alternatively, I think that he's most likely going to be picked off from a distance. And yeah, that's what I foresee, to be honest. I think that Adesanya, pound for pound, is the best striker in the UFC. Costa is obviously one of the best middleweights out there, but I just can't see him getting to Adesanya's chin and stopping him. And likewise, I don't think he's got the craft to win 3 out of 5 rounds either. So I'm picking Adesanya here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Sean, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's a really good breakdown, to be honest. I think this is a classic example of a styles make fights sort of matchup. Obviously, coming off the fight against Yoel Romero, a lot of people are saying, well, he didn't look very good, but Izzy really struggles, I think, against counter strikers. Like even when he fought Anderson Silva on the way up, that was a very strange fight considering the age difference and how good Izzy is. He really doesn't like to have to lead the dance. And I think in many respects, Paulo is a perfect matchup to bring out the best that Izzy has to offer, to be honest.
I agree. And the other thing, not that I imagine this is going to happen, but Paulo got taken down at will by Uriah Hall, right? Uriah Hall hit him with 2 power doubles and was like, see ya, enjoy those. And, don't get me wrong, Paulo did really well to get back up, but then, it is what it is. And Yoel Romero hit him with a couple of, it's Yoel Romero, so if you get taken down by Yoel Romero, it is what it is, and it's fine. But Yoel Romero kind of took him down whenever he wanted as well. So I do think if things get a bit gnarly, you could see Izzy mix in some wrestling, right? He attempted to mix in some wrestling feints against Kelvin to just show him a different look. And the thing I think that really epitomizes this fight is Costa had Yoel Romero against the fence, hurt. Yoel Romero points to the crowd and Costa looks. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
The oldest trick in the book.
And he falls
from
for it.
the dawn of combat sports.
Yeah, unbelievable. All right, so Sean, who have you got?
Yeah, so I've got Izzy. One thing I will say for Paulo is he's really tough. So I could see Izzy actually. I think he'll still finish it in the 4th or 5th round. To be honest, I don't think Paulo's gonna respond well to the championship rounds.
Jack.
Yeah, I'm same as Sean. Izzy in round 4 or 5.
And I think we're all in some kind of agreement, right? And the reason why I'm picking Izzy in 4 or 5 is because Paulo also tired against Romero in that 2nd round. And we saw that in the 3rd round that Romero had when he absolutely dominated him. And I think that he also tied in the Uriah Hall fight, and it just so happens that he landed 2 absolutely terrible nut shots. And I do think that played some form of aspect into Uriah Hall getting more tired and Uriah Hall's movement not working. But I think if Izzy can jab him consistently, work his body, work his legs, and stay away from those big hands, Paulo is essentially going to be a sitting duck. There's so much muscle mass to move there, and there's so much explosiveness that is his work. If that's gone, yeah, it's a long, long night, right? It's a long, long night. Yeah, so perfect. That's the card. Overall, I think that's a great card. Sean, have you got any closing thoughts for us?
Just that I want to apologise to the Polish people for not picking Jan, and also the incredibly bad karaoke that I forced everyone to listen through while I was in their country. But yeah. And
Jack, any closing thoughts for us?
Yeah, really, really looking forward to this card, especially after a few fairly slow weeks, shall we say. And I think Izzy Costa is probably the best fight you can make across all of the divisions right now. So absolutely looking forward to that.
I agree. Perfect. Well, gentlemen, I will thank you very, very much for your time, and for everyone that's watching, enjoy the fights.
Thank you.